Hello, everyone. I think our folks are coming in. I'll give them 1 second to get us started. My name's Sean Gio. I'm the Policy Director at Partnership for Strong Communities. And on behalf of the partnership, welcome to the next session at this year's Connecticut's Affordable Housing Conference. The conference features local, state, and national experts that will lead us in conversations that explore challenges, share best practices, and coalesce us around critical next steps to address key affordable housing issues in the state. So now we're going to have a really great session to follow on what we've just heard from Jerusalem. And we'll have an opportunity to hear from legislative leaders within the Connecticut General Assembly. Conversation is going to be moderated by Bill Wells with Gallo Robinson. This panel will explore topics including housing development, services, supports, tenant protections, zoning reform, and possibly more. Panelists will discuss what did or didn't pass in the last session, 2024 session, and offer their insights on how advocates and leaders in the state can make progress on housing within the state legislature. As always, none of this is possible without the support of our generous sponsors who make the conference a success and free for you to attend today. Thank you to the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, our presenting sponsor, and also to our visionary sponsor, Wells Fargo. Thank you to Robinson Cole, Cohen Resnick, the Connecticut Department of Housing, J. D'Amelia Associates, Trinity Financial, and Liberty Bank. And our foundation sponsors, M&T Bank, Hinckley Allen, Beacon Communities, FHL Bank Boston, Capital for Change, and Connecticut Investment Advisors. Our sponsors' deep support allows this conference to happen each year and for us to offer it free to all that attend. So a reminder, the sessions are being recorded. You can use the Q&A button for questions, and you can use the chat function to talk directly with Partnership for Strong Community staff if you're having technical issues. And with, one more thing, this year we have post-session, you can complete a session feedback survey. You'll see when you're in the lobby for the conference at the upper right, you'll see a megaphone icon. You can click that and complete a brief survey. We appreciate your feedback. With that, I'll turn it over to Bill Wells to get us started. Bill?
Morning, guys. My name is Bill Wells. As said, I'm the lobbyist. I work for Gallo Robinson, and I've been humbled to get to work with the good folks at the Partnership for Strong Communities since 2019. And I'm humbled to work with everybody on this call here with me. Some I've been working with since they've been in the building, and some even further. I've known Jason since I walked through the doors back in 2012. And but grateful of this group of panelists. I think you guys are gonna enjoy it. I just want to do a few quick round of just introductions for folks who don't know. So I'm going to start directly next to me is Rep. Jason Rojas, Majority Leader of the House of Representatives in Connecticut. He is a true champion of housing, and he has been serving since 2008. And we've been so lucky to have his thoughtful leadership on housing initiatives. And even though, I think he coined the term incremental progress, he works hard to get stuff done, and we really appreciate that from Jason. We also have Senator M.D. Rahman, who's getting on video soon. He's making his way over there, but I'm going to still introduce him. And he represents Andover, Bolton, Manchester, and Glastonbury. This is his sophomore year in the state senate. He just won his re-election, so he will be going into his sophomore term. He is the co-chair of the P&D committee, where he has been tackling housing availability and zoning reforms. We also have Rep. Eleni Cavros-DeGraw. I'm sorry, this button keeps blocking my view of my speakers. I have a Rep. Eleni Cavros-DeGraw, who represents Avon and Canton. She was elected in 2020 and has become a quick study in zoning through her co-chairmanship of the Planning and Development Committee. And she really took over that committee from Rep. McCarthy Vahey ready to go, which was delightful to watch. And she's very excellent to work with. I also see Rep. Antonio Felipe. from Bridgeport, who was elected in the 2019 special session. And it's funny, he came in when I started lobbying, and it feels like he's just been in the building forever. He's just been so ingrained on policy and has made so many connections. And just all great guy to work with. But he last session, he's known to jump into things and get things done. He was the third House chairman in one session of the Housing Committee, and he came in at a pivotal time when it was JF deadlines, where literally things are moving out of the committee, and he jumped in, he got the work done, and him and Rep. Cavers DeGraw and Jason obviously moved that massive housing bill through the process. So good work to all of you. And we also have Rep. Ron Napoli from Waterbury, who was elected in 2018. He is the co-chair of the bonding subcommittee of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, which is so important for housing because that's literally where the public capital comes from for affordable housing, and affordable housing cannot be built in the state without that public contribution from that our legislature and the governor makes together. And Ron sits at that very important spot where he oversees all that. So we're going to have a conversation today about the upcoming legislative session. Election feels like forever ago, and also feels like just yesterday. But we're walking into a new legislature. The House picked up 4 additional seats. So the majority will be at 102 now, and the Senate picked up 1 additional seat, and they'll have 25. But you know, a lot of the old and new issues are going to persist, and we're going to talk about where folks think things are going. So I'm going to start real kind of generally. Just my first question, I'll start with Rep. Rojas, and then I'll kind of go around the horn. You know, what are you hearing from your actual constituents? You know, there's a lot of advocate buzz, and there's a lot of people in the Capitol that talk about housing. But are you hearing from your actual constituents on housing issues? And if so, what are you hearing the most? And I'll kick it to Jason.
No, thanks, Bill, and certainly thanks to my colleagues for being here and to the partnership for sponsoring this, and for all the attendees who I cannot see, but I understand are robust in numbers. Appreciate everybody remaining focused on this issue. And, you know, after 10 or 12 years of talking about housing issues, I think it's really good to see, sadly, unfortunately, it has risen, gotten onto the minds of lots of people at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level. And certainly that presents an opportunity for us to take action on it. If there is the political will to do so. And it remains to be seen as to whether there is to do something a bit more dramatic and strategic and aggressive to address what is a significant housing supply shortfall, in addition to a lot of the kind of regulatory and administrative and you know, obstacles that tenants face who are renters, but homeowners as well too. And you know, I'll be honest with you, I don't hear enough from constituents about housing, right? You often hear from a constituent when there is a crisis. But when there isn't a crisis, most of my constituents are still housing cost burdened, even though they may not recognize it or realize it, or don't think about it in that context enough to reach out to their legislator. And I think that probably remains the same. You know, perhaps it depends on kind of the rental makeup of your district and your community. When there's more home ownership, I think people are more comfortable in their housing. But even in the rental marketplace, when most people are comfortable in their financial situation, they tend not to think about how much they're actually paying towards housing because it's an absolute necessity. So most people don't have a choice but to pay whatever it is the cost of housing is. And I'm hoping that we can advance a conversation to get more people to get more people thinking about what are the opportunity costs of whether you're a renter or a homeowner and what you have to pay towards housing versus everything else that's important to you in your life, and you're able to provide transportation, be able to afford food, be able to take a vacation with your family, right? All of those things come at the expense of things that you have to pay for, one of the core things being housing. So I do hear from people, we respond to them as needed, but certainly don't hear enough about it because I think it's, again, something that most of us takes for granted when we're stable in our housing.
Eleni?
So I actually hear about it more than you would imagine. I would say significantly from my seniors, because their challenges is that they are trying to get out of the houses that they really cannot afford anymore in many cases, but there's not some sort of affordable senior living for them to go to. We have a huge project in Avon that we're hoping to get off the ground that would be, you know, 100% affordable housing and senior focused, and they're very excited about that prospect. That's one group that I hear from. I also hear from parents who have adult disabled children. We are lucky enough to have some set aside units in Canton at Bear Woods Apartments, but there are only 20 odd units, and that's really not enough for the population that we see that are able to live independently, but are not able to find necessarily the housing they need in their own community. That's the same thing that the seniors would say too. They'd like to be able to stay in their communities, and they are struggling with that. Obviously from young families who would like to move into the community, we do hear from those occasionally as well. Mostly, in terms of message boards and that sort of thing, but saying like, why is it so hard to find a house out here? Well, it's the same reason it's hard to find a house many places. So we definitely hear about that. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting this time around on the campaign, and probably because I had focused so much on it in the past 2 years, I heard a lot of people who are worried about our growing homeless population, especially because the largest or the fastest growing number right now is women over the age of 55. And I think that you don't have to experience it to be concerned about it. And so I think that it's important that people in communities like mine are still thinking about the problem that we are facing with a growing homeless problem and people not transitioning out of shelter because there's really nowhere to go.
Antonio?
Thank you, Bill. I think the biggest thing that I hear about, honestly, is when people are in crisis, right? I don't hear about housing on a general basis from regular folks. I hear it when somebody's going through a big issue, whether it's mold and all the things that we don't do to protect people when their landlord doesn't tell them they have mold in their house, infestations of rats, cockroaches, things like that. And also just the skyrocketing prices of some of these apartments, and folks going, there's all these buildings around me, there's all these units around me, but I can't afford them. So how am I supposed to live in this new economy, the way that things are going? Especially, I think this morning I was listening to the new Fast Car by Luke Combs that came out a year ago, and I was just listening to the lyrics, right? Tracy Chapman wrote that song in 1986. And there is a line that says, been working at the convenience store trying to save just a little bit of money. There's nobody you can think of right now that works at a convenience store that is saving money. They are scraping by, some of them barely, some of them going into debt. That reality doesn't exist anymore. For people to have a regular menial job and then find places to live, be able to support their families. So I think, right now, a lot of what I hear about is folks in crisis. And then, yes, as Eleni talked about, the homeless population. There's a lot of folks here in some of our parks, some of our plazas, especially like behind the courthouse here downtown Bridgeport. It's a problem, and we need to make sure that we're putting in supports for those folks, and also getting rooms filled with people who do that work on the ground, and not just us who know the statistics but maybe don't see it on a regular basis.
Thank you for that. Ron?
Hi, Bill. Thanks for the question, and thanks for having me here today. It's an honor to join my colleagues who have done a lot of great work on this issue. But look, a lot of us had to canvass our districts this year, right, and have real, tangible conversations with people. And so I'll share a story that I had with you all, and so I met a woman, a mom of three, a single mom. And so she worked at a very popular grocery chain for about 3 or 4 years and had a great work history, did very well there, actually got promoted. And so her employers had a lot of respect for her work ethics. But then all 3 of her kids got sick at the same time. And so as a single mom, we could all understand that she had to stay home and take care of her kids and her family. And so because of that, right, she lost her job. And so there are so many people in our state and across this country where if you're behind 1 or 2 paychecks, it's almost impossible to get caught up. And so again, here's somebody with a great work history, right? And so by the time I spoke to her, she already found a new job that she's really excited about, but she's behind 1 month on her rent. And so, having to really face choices about, paying rent or buying groceries for her kids, these are real issues. And so, making sure that we tackle these issues to make sure people have a chance is really important.
And I think I see Senator Rahman. I just want to I see a hand. I'm going to call on you. I'll repeat the question just so you hear it. Are you hearing from constituents on housing issues? And if so, what are you hearing the most, Senator?
Sorry, I just came in. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, listen, first thing I want to start with, when people see your elected official It's not one item or two item, laundry of items they're complaining, am I right? But what I think, so we should focus on next session, creating more housing and also putting the law in place, make sure we helping the tenants. Like last time, the last session we did, sometime, landlord increasing the rent without any notice. So I think we put in place 45 days prior to increasing the rent. That's a little bit help. So most importantly, like Eleni mentioned about the homeless, population. Reason all those, rent going up and homeless, also increasing community, and the property is pretty expensive. Also, if you have the even good job, you can't even afford to pay the rent. So all is because we have the housing shortage. I think first priority, we need to creating more housing, affordable housing or transit-oriented housing, anything. All the platform, I think we need it. So that's the main priority. I think so will be this session, MICE, and of course, along that with so many other items we need to and continue work on for cost savings, Connecticut residents overall, all area. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And, talking about priorities, incremental progress is happening every session on housing issues, whether it be tenants' rights, zoning, availability, affordability, there's things that are being done. I would like to ask each of you from last session, what was one thing that you really held close to and that you were very excited that got passed and on the session, and maybe you could also just say your thing that you're very happy that got passed, and then your thing that was like, we came so close, but not yet. And I'm very excited to pick it up and work on it again this year. And I'll rotate a little bit, and I'll start with Eleni on this one.
Thanks. So I'm going to start with my frustration. So it was really exciting to get transit-oriented development, also known as work, live, ride, out of the House. Really super excited. I was so pleased to see so many people finally understand what as of right means, because we spent a whole lot of time explaining that to folks. And it was nice to see such a large portion of our caucus stepping up and understanding that and getting on board and recognizing that it's one solution that we are really looking forward to. Certainly would like to bring that back and fight the good fight again for that bill. And so we're going to absolutely have that conversation. I would say, in terms of successes, I think we had quite a few, and I don't want to steal the majority leader's thunder, so I'll leave a couple things out. But I will say it was exciting that we can nursing home conversions, we're all struggling to figure out how we're going to do commercial conversions. And certainly with nursing homes, they're just sitting there. And so that was exciting because CCM actually was really on board with that. They gave us some great feedback language that we were able to put in so that we could be more enabling to towns to be able to build multifamily housing out of those nursing homes. So we're excited about that. I think that some of our smaller tweaks are, hopefully will yield some big results, but I'm really looking forward to this session because we have a lot of ideas moving forward of what we can actually do.
Senator Rahman, we'll stick with the trend of the Planning and Development Committee. What was something that was excited that you got across the finish line, and what is something that you would like to pick back up?
My co-chair, Ellen, thank you. She already laid out very nicely. Yes, we did the nursing home bill, so it's a little bit help creating more, housing there. And of course, the commercial property boards, hopefully I will talk with her, with our leadership, both sides, Senate and House, if we can bring back that bill also. That will help also creating more housing, all areas, especially transit-oriented area, mostly all commercial property settings. Along that, yes, I am looking forward to work with all my colleagues. And of course, my co-chair is the superstar, so always focusing on creating more housing. And I am ready to help at any way we can, to creating more housing.
Ron, what about and this doesn't have to be the capital side, it's whatever you thought was your favorite, but there's the capital side that you oversee too. But what about you for last session?
And so, look, I mean, my colleagues have touched upon this, right? A lot of our communities, especially in urban areas that I represent, are seeing increased levels of poverty, right? And so it's there. And so, last session, our legislature was really proactive on finding ways to address that. And so I think we put $20 million in the bond bill so we could expand shelter services and really make sure that as winters approach, that people really have a place to go. And so that was really important. Something I would like to see in the future, maybe, look, a lot of our local housing authorities are really tapped out and don't have vouchers. And so, trying to get additional vouchers so we can get, people into places before the wintertime arrives is something I hope we can look at.
Antonio, on the housing committee front, what about you? I know there's a lot of ground covered, but a lot of ground still out there.
Yeah, so the ground's still out there. I'll start with first and foremost. I think we have a question on it later. No cause eviction. I think that is something that's huge in our state. That's something that goes towards what I was talking about earlier. People kind of shuffling folks out and then outpricing units for them. We need to make sure that just cause eviction is something that we look at very, very heavily. I've already started having conversations with folks at least in our caucus, and I know those conversations have been pretty good. Just getting people to understand what we're doing and understand the challenges they have there. Secondly, we also had, it's a smaller one, but we had the Interagency Council on Homelessness. We wanted to make sure that we added nonprofits to that. We didn't get it through the Senate last year. So Senator Rahman, I hope you guys can help us kind of push it through this year. We would really look forward to that. But the things that we did pass, I mean, small incremental things. We changed the way that folks value real property for some of these cities when it comes to affordable housing units. I think that's really important because that takes away a lot of the burden from some folks that are really trying to create affordable housing here in Connecticut. But going along again with some of the misses that we had, it might not be what we tried to do last year exactly, but some general support to some of our housing authorities and some way for us to get those housing authorities to be able to help surrounding towns. There are so many people in suburban towns that tell me, I would love to have affordable housing. I just don't know how to create it. We have folks that really do, that have really done a great job. And we need to make sure that people look at affordable housing a little bit differently, because I think there's a stigmatism against it. But at the same time, we just need to make sure that they're allowed to be expanded in a way that can be helpful to folks that just want to do it but don't know how.
I think it's, and thank you for sharing that. I just want to let folks know on the Zoom here today. We actually do have two committees in action right now, large committees, Appropriations and Public Health, that are doing a hearing. And if you see any of my panelists disappear, it's because they're going to vote, and we will cover for that. But I just wanted to let folks know that we will, if we lose Eleni or Antonio, who will sit on those committees, it's because they've been called in to vote, and we will act accordingly. But I just want to let folks know. Jason, I mean, you lift these mantles high, and you carry these things like a trusted quarterback. I know that you've expressed a lot of frustration with the process and everything, but obviously you get a lot done too. So what's that thing out there that you passed in that bill last year that you're really proud of, and what would you like to see us pick back up on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, a lot of it's already been said by my colleagues, but, I don't know how popular this one is with most of my allies, right? But we did make an adjustment to the 8-30G structure, right? To try to encourage more towns to zone as of right, which I think is a major victory. I know Representative Calros DeGraw referred to that, about piercing kind of that obstacle that is as of right, and really trying to remove the step in the process in which things have to go to a public hearing as opposed to just being administratively done by the town, so long as it's in conformance with local rules and regulations. Because we know that when the public hearing happens in your local planning and zoning, there's some number of people who will come out and oppose things. And that local land use body is going to respond to that feedback and maybe pause things, maybe delay things, maybe reject things outright, right? And all of that builds up to kind of the status quo that we have, where we simply don't have enough supply of housing in general. And we certainly don't have enough supply of diverse housing in communities of opportunity. So, we did adjust 8-30G to try to get at more middle housing. Those are smaller kind of developments, 2 units, 4 units, 6 units, 8 units, that we hope are less threatening to communities. but allow them to kind of reach that goal, which I think shouldn't be the goal to get into a moratorium, right? The goal should be to develop more housing, not to get a moratorium from 8-30G, which actually doesn't impact the vast majority of communities. But that seems to be the goal. You know, one thing to think about is also not so much in a year-to-year basis, but thinking back over the biennium. So what we did in 2023, which actually went into effect in 24, a big one, I think, for renters, right, is removing eviction records from the judicial system, from the judicial website, I think was a major policy accomplishment, right? So when a person is going through the eviction process, they go through it, you know, it's been dismissed by the landlord or by the court, it's been withdrawn by the court or the landlord, or was actually decided in favor of the tenant. In those situations, why should there be any record of an eviction process that a future landlord can go look at when it actually ended in a positive way? For far too long, that information was out there and was really hurting renters' ability to find new housing. And also, as part of that legislation, we also said that those records can't be sold to tenant screening companies, right? Removing another veto or obstacle point for renters who are simply just trying to seek new housing when they need to move. So I think, you know, we think about it in terms of legislative sessions. We know last year was a 91-day session, short session in an election year. Unfortunately, hard to do really big things or controversial things because of those dynamics. So we should go back to looking to the first year of the biennium to really understand exactly the kind of progress that is being made on housing.
Yeah, that eviction records that you bring up, I mean, that's been kicking around for a long time, and you know, and that was a big one to get accomplished. And you know, it's one of those things where it was really important for. It really impacts people's availability to housing, but really hard to just get everybody on the right page with the fact that there should, you know, multiple judicial branch involvement, you know, political involvement and all that. So that was a very big one, and I'm glad you mentioned that. You know, we had a ton of tenants show up for the past at least 2 to 3 years now. You know, it was more virtually in the beginning. Now they're, you know, coming more to the Capitol as the building is now opened up, as we're back to a healthy place. And you know, I assume they're gonna be back again. You know, and I guess I'll start with Antonio on this, is because they have chiefly been showing up at the Housing Committee. You know, you brought up the just cause of, you know, no fault evictions issue. You know, they also brought up issues of rent affordability. You know, what do you see in the short and long term that could be done to answer some of these outcries from a large group of tenants in the state of Connecticut?
First of all, they better keep showing up, because we haven't done the things that we really need to do for a lot of these tenants. We talked about just cause eviction. I think, you know, Jason just brought up how we've wiped some of the records for folks where it's gone positively. There are some folks who just don't have the money to fight it, and they get evicted and they go, all right, this is gonna happen, and that eviction goes on their record, whether it's warranted or not. Sometimes it's just folks who want to, you know, get their units cleared out so they can upcharge and get out of that fair and equitable rent statute. And people get screwed left and right. I think I talked earlier about, you know, infestations of mold and rats and cockroaches, and what we don't do here to kind of help folks from that. We haven't talked about, you know, people who own multiple units under an LLC from a different state and never look at their unit. I think it's those units are 20% more likely, or maybe 40% more likely to be in disrepair. It's a huge issue. And I think we need to look at many ways just to make sure renters are heard, renters are understood. You know, for those of my colleagues that are, you know, on this panel and maybe watching on with us, most of your constituents are probably renters. They're not the folks who own the building, they're the folks in the building. Because if somebody owns, you know, 15 units, the renters are the ones that are voting for you. So we need to make sure we're doing a lot for those folks. In terms of like rent and affordability, just cause will go towards that in terms of people not eschewing the fair and equitable rent statute, but also, you know, hopefully the market eventually has to regulate itself. You're not going to get a lot of people being able to afford a $3,500 apartment in Bridgeport. But that being said, you have to incentivize rent control. I don't think we're going to do rent caps in Connecticut. I don't think it's really worked anywhere. But incentivizing a way to control the rent to make sure that the market does it for you, I think is something that we need to look at very, very closely.
And And I'll just say to the panelists here on this part, since we're kind of talking generally about tenants issues, and then I'm going to obviously bring up zoning and availability. Folks have something they want to add on the tenant thing. Just raise your hand or get off mute or just jump right in, because I think at this point we're free flowing here. Just feel free to unmute on either of these questions.
Yeah, Bill, I mean, the only thing I would add, right, is, we have to take, I think Representative Felipe is correct, right, that we need to hear the voices of tenants, which often are difficult to capture in our process because people are working, right, and they don't have time to sit around, even though we have Zoom public hearings, which makes it easier. I think most people are really focused on living their lives, right, working, taking care of the family, taking care of the kids, trying to get dinner on the table. And they rely on us, right, to be advocates inside the building to try to do an advanced policy that's really going to represent their interests, knowing they don't have time. But I also think we need to engage landlords, right? I mean, I think, the conversation also all kind of makes it appear as if the landlord community is some monolith, right? That they're all the same. As I have taken the time to meet with them and learn from them, many of them are small business operators themselves, maybe manage 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, right? They're not these large out-of-state landlords that perhaps are managing 500 units. And we have some in-state operators who are operating big ones, but we also need to understand the nature of the rental business. Representative Felipe alluded to kind of rent caps. There are questions about that. We know that most landlords would prefer to keep their tenants long-term, right? That adds to financial stability for the business that they're running. So I think they're naturally incentivized to want to have stability in their renters. Naturally, there are going to be exceptions to that rule. And there are certainly bad actors in the landlord community too. But I think we should probably try to come from a position that most of them are good actors and try to do the right thing. So how do we build bridges between the landlords and property owners and tenant organizations, try to arrive at a solution that can really meet the needs of both communities? Because I don't think that's impossible to arrive at.
And just as, if not longer, P&D has been holding hearings on zonings that, at least when Rep. Kristen McCarthy-Vahey was there, went over the 24-hour mark. I don't think since your tenure you've been blessed with that long of a public hearing, Eleni, but you and MD are definitely sitting through hearing a lot of different voices. What are you hearing out there on zoning, and why and I guess my question is, why are people so reactionary to when the legislature is making changes to zoning principles?
I'll start just because I don't see Senator Rahman on right now, but in terms of his camera, I think that part of it is, obviously we know that we have 169 municipalities and they all have differing opinions on what's best for them. And I think that in some cases we've lost the narrative, right? I mean, we enabled zoning as the state, and so I think that there's this narrative that because they're independent municipalities that they get to decide everything all the time. And while we want them to make the best decisions for their towns, we do have towns that have just said, no, we're not building. And that's for a variety of reasons, historic redlining, for, other reasons as well. I mean, certainly the position of people who generally oppose housing, I would say, in the Farmington Valley comes down to, well, you're going to pack the schools. There's too much pressure, you're going to bring down the value of other housing. There's all of these ideas sort of swirling in the ethos that are frankly incorrect. And we have the data now to prove that. So some of this is overcoming the narrative of what, we should or should not be doing around zoning. I think that continuing to use the phrase local control is also not helping us, because while I think that towns should have, be empowered to make decisions, they do need to make decisions. And we are facing a housing crisis of probably at least 90,000 units. And so I think that whatever we can do in order to enable more units to be built in, the best way possible, again, there are examples out there. It's not like we don't have examples of how to do this. I'll just say one thing about in terms of commercial conversion. We need to have an ongoing conversation about that. It was part of the majority leaders roundtable. We know that it's very expensive, but we also have to look at the fact that we have, say, for instance, suburban industrial parks all over Connecticut that may be a space in which we could really use to convert and take, for the developers that are willing to even look at it, that may be a place to zone. And again, I think a lot of this is education. I think people need to spend a little more time talking to their town planners. There's a lot of forward-thinking town planners around zoning and planning that have a lot to say on what our communities could look like with the appropriate planning that is forward-thinking for the kind of Connecticut that we all want.
And
I'm going to touch the
good,
third
there he
rail
is.
for a second. I think also we need to look at, like we did last year. I didn't want to steal the majority leader's thunder earlier to talk about middle housing, but the changes to 830G and how we can somehow incentivize folks with points. I know that we don't want to change the kind of integrity of what the statute's supposed to be and what it's supposed to do, but at the same time, we need to make sure that folks are kind of in that middle place. I take myself for example. I probably make more money than I should for somebody who lives in an apartment that rents for what my apartment rents. But the alternative to go to something larger is about $1,000 to $1,500 gap. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for me to do that. We need to capture folks that are in that place, because then my apartment would be available for somebody who can't afford something right now, or there are people who literally can afford a $1,200 apartment in certain places that are temporarily homeless. It's disgusting. So in order for us to zone, to use this, we need to make sure that we look at 830G and also look at the zoning requirements that make some of the 830G requirements tough on communities that aren't, Bridgeport, New Haven, Harper.
Sarah MD, I saw you went off mute. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you. I think that I agree with Eleni what she's lay out here. So the more important thing is here, I think we are missing the point, the town, am I right? 169 towns and cities. Most towns don't want to allow the builder or developer, rebuild or develop or whatever it is. It's a law why they design really tight. So let me tell you, look, election day, number of people, my district, Glastonbury, came to me, and they was talking about the 830G, and South Glastonbury, Nabak, school, and I asked them, say, when last time in Glastonbury, especially South Glastonbury, build anything, any housing? Tell me, except a single family, some, like 5 acre, 10 acres land. Am I right? So what do you worry for? Don't you worry, where your daughter gonna, live? From now, maybe, like my daughter, she's gonna be 18. When she's 18, she's gonna say, maybe, Dad, I want to live my own. So, but she can afford to live South Glastonbury, $3,500 or $4,000 2-bedroom, And even though if you're able to pay or you can afford, but it still is there is no 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom South Glastonbury. I think the problem is our local zoning. We need to look very closely. This is they are holding a town like that, Fairfield, Litchfield, can open the apartment complex or even duplex some point, some degree, some area. So we need to look the local zoning regulations. We need to move some red tabs in order to creating more housing. I think that will be really a big deal. Otherwise, all the commercial property like Eleni is talking about, they're not going to allow us. So you can continue complain about the rent. You can continue complaining about the $200,000 property, $300,000. All going to be there unless we're creating more housing, and town have to allow us to go there, building more and also converting more. This is how we can fix this problem, I believe. Thank you.
I'm going to take a question that came in.
Bill,
go ahead, Jason.
Ron Napoli was before me, and then I was going to say something about the zoning question.
Ron, sorry, I didn't see you had your hand
Jason.
up.
Yeah.
But and Antonio Fleet's got to go to his meeting. Thank you, Antonio, so much. Go ahead, Ron.
Thanks. No, thanks, Bill. So I was just going to add, the tenants and the landlords who really got engaged with the committee process and who really followed the committee process did help us lead to really better policies, right? And so our legislature made sure that tenants now have assets and resources to legal representation, so they're not left alone, right? That was pretty important. We established a fair rent commission, and so I think we have to look at that though and make sure that the fair rent commissions are really helping people get the answers that they need to these complicated questions. And I think there should be community groups that really work between landlords and tenants that tackle some of these big issues. But I think, we are going in the right direction, but some of these things still have to happen.
Yeah, I only wanted to just add, it's not unreasonable for residents and homeowners and property owners to have concern about a development that may impact the largest investment that they'll ever make in their life, right? It's not unreasonable. The other side of that is I think it is just intellectually lazy on the part of a lot of people who serve in the building. And, not to be partisan here, but there are only Democrats on this panel. I think Republicans purport to care about this issue. I think they should talk about it more, but I could also hope that they would, not make such easy use of the local control rhetoric, right? Or actually confuse people about what's being proposed up at the Capitol, and actually what's happening even locally, right? Again, I live in one community in the state of Connecticut, and I don't, but I care about every community in the state of Connecticut, right? I don't need to live in Darien or somewhere in Fairfield County to care about those communities, because I'm a statewide policymaker as much as being a representative of my district. But there's no qualms about it, right? The rhetoric that is used is lazy, in my opinion. And they're not actually putting up solid arguments as to why we shouldn't do things other than this very abstract notion of local control. When most of what we do at the state capitol is maintaining local control, but perhaps putting some additional parameters in place that local land use boards have to follow, which is certainly within the authority of the state legislature to do, given that we devolve the power of local land use boards to exist and engage in the work that they do. So it's appropriate that the state would also have a say in that. Again, while respecting that a lot of decisions do need to be made at the local level, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have input in it as statewide policymakers, and perhaps people who have less of a very hyper local focused interest in what's happening in a community.
Yeah, and I'll just say, we always strive every year for a bipartisan panel. We've successfully had that in the past. Rep. Zullo has been a great addition to this conversation, and he's unfortunately had stuck in court today. The troubles of a part-time legislature, as you guys all have your other jobs that you all have to balance at the same time too. But we strive for these bipartisan agendas for panels, and because it's important to hear all sides of the aisle. So I just want to let folks know that we those invites were made, and we work on that stuff. I have a jump ball question here for whoever wants to take it. It's from the audience. We have a lot of landlords that are a little hesitant to accept housing vouchers. The question is, what can the legislature take to encourage more landlords to participate in accepting housing vouchers? And I'll jump all that because it came from the audience.
Representative DiCaprio votes yes.
Bill, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go.
It's okay, Senator. Yeah, Senator is voting too. I think they're both voting. So Ron and Jason, I'll jump all for you guys.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a hard question to answer because I think the situation is different for every landlord and tenant, right? Are there some biases against individuals who are recipients of a housing choice voucher? Probably. Have landlords had a negative experience with somebody who has a housing choice voucher? Now that paints their kind of future perceptions of what those types of individuals are? Probably. Right. Certainly, should we increase the value of them and put more money into the hand of voucher recipients to make it, less of a risk to take them as a renter? I think that's something we can do. Certainly, education about what the program is and what the profile of a voucher holder is, I think, would be helpful to demystifying exactly that. But it's a hard question for us to legislate. I think I could be wrong about that, and if somebody has good ideas about it, I'm certainly all ears.
Yeah, and so I would agree with Jason, Bill. It really is a tough question to answer. It could be many different things, right? And so, but what we could look at is, and what I've noticed, like in Waterbury, for example, when we have, in-state landlords or, landlords that live in the communities where they serve, they tend to be more responsive to tenant needs. And so finding a way to really incentivize property owners, who live in those communities, right, to be more present. And so that could perhaps be something to look at in the near future.
And I'll just weigh in briefly. I would say that, incentivize, yes. But also I think there have to be greater penalties for out-of-state landlords that leave things in disrepair. And that was why we passed a bunch of blight laws in the past couple of years to sort of give especially cities the opportunity to fine more heavily those that are leaving these buildings in such a state, and then they don't want to answer a phone call when you call. So we are seeing some gains from that in some of our cities, and I hope that continues to work, because I do feel terrible for our mom and pop kind of landlords that are doing the right thing, and especially some of our developers who do not abandon their projects and make sure that they have someone that works for them that is still on site after the fact. But we have to have accountability for these larger conglomerate type out of state landlords that are not serving our folks.
Absolutely. State makes many investments in housing, and housing can be whether or not it's bonding for affordable housing, the creation of new housing, homelessness system. If you had some state funding to appropriate to something that you thought was really important, whether it's existing or new, what is that, and why do you think we should do it? And I'll start with Jason on that one.
Well, no, thank you. Yeah, like we commit a lot of resources to housing. A lot of it is to help develop market rate housing with a sprinkle of affordable housing in there from time to time. And I think we've neglected our public housing authorities for far too long. And I think we need to dedicate far more resources to helping support public housing authorities to develop housing that is truly affordable and really gets at that $90,000 number, which I think are trying to meet the needs of individuals at the lowest end of the income spectrum. It's a marketplace failure. We're not going to see any of the current programs solve for that. So I think we really need to invest in our public housing authorities who are locally governed, therefore have local control, have current assets and land that they are already in possession of, or actually have current properties that are in dire need of rehabilitation. So I think we need to take care of current tenants, but also provide opportunities for new ones.
Ron?
Thanks. And so the bonding subcommittee has really taken an aggressive approach to housing, as you may know. And so I'll go through some of the things that we have done that we're super proud of. And so back in 2023, we passed House Bill 5001, which was really one of the best IDD bills in the country. And so in that legislation, there was a suggestion for supportive housing. And so in the bond bill, we reserved $50 million for individuals who need supportive housing, right? We also changed the language that adjusted the revenue stream for supportive housing, right? So it used to go to DDS, and now it goes to DOH because we want to get that money out as quickly as possible. And I'm proud to say that on the October agenda, there was $6.5 million that was approved for supportive housing. We also have the Housing Trust Fund and the Flex program that's also used to really, make sure that there's resources available, not just for supportive housing, but for other housing initiatives. In fact, the investment for fiscal year 24 and 25 was about $600 million. That is a significant investment, and I'd be remiss, by the way, if I didn't thank our governor, our speaker, Matt Ritter, and Jason for allowing the bonding subcommittee to put that kind of investment behind housing. Also, my colleague, co-chair Senator Moore, these issues were also really important to her as well. We also reestablished MRDA, the Municipal Redevelopment Authority, and that in the future could always can be a vehicle for supportive housing. And so, and by the way, some of this work that we've done it on a bipartisan basis, right? And so that's certainly some momentum that we want to keep going, right? But again, the subcommittee and the legislature has really made this a priority, and we put money behind it to prove that.
Senator, I just want to check if you heard the question. If you had some state resources available to fund something existing or new on the housing side, what would you fund?
Thank you. Sorry, back and forth with the other one. Well, listen, anything help creating more housing. I think we need to increase more, providing the incentives, either a builder or developer, whoever coming our town, to encourage them to build and invest more, creating more housing. That's very important, I think. And I think next session, my co-chair and our Senate and House leadership, I want to talk about this thing because everything is pretty expensive to build now. Either you talk about the labor cost or inventories, everything. So in order to build and creating more housing, we need to also help the builder and developer and make sure they are coming. They don't want to build something if they don't make money, all right? So we have to help the state, I think, need to help them with incentives or anything or tax break, whatever it is.
Plenary, how about you?
To that point, before I forget, just so that everyone kind of has it in their calendars, we're going to be doing an informational hearing come January with the home builders and the Connecticut Realtors. And that'll be the P&D committee with the insurance committee, with the banking committee, and the housing committee. So at least I hope they all agree. So working on that moving forward. If I could wave a magic wand, because I think that was part of the initial question, I would say a line item for homelessness to actually adequately fund the homeless response system. And that also includes 211 and making sure that when people call in that they have people who know what they're doing and that they're receiving, adequate and timely response, because I think they're doing the best they can, but I think that they could probably use more people answering phones kind of thing. But also the fact that we have so many people inside of our shelters that are holding down 2 jobs. And as Representative Felipe said, they can't afford, or their voucher expires while they're in the shelter. I would, if I had a magic wand, that's where I would put it. I love how Houston's doing things, housing first, just saying.
And I think probably the last question here, that I want to kind of throw out there. We're going into this legislative session. There's going to be impassioned advocates on both sides of the aisle. I start with Jason, because as you'll probably lead a large initiative again or a large bill again, a lot of folks are going to be coming to you the next few weeks to talk about priorities. What can advocates do better to help the legislature overcome the real political will questions that are out there? I mean, the Connecticut has grown so much in the way that the political balance is. What can advocates do to be a better resource to folks in the Capitol to help you get the good things done?
Yeah, no, I think they need to raise awareness about these issues out there in the community and at the ground level, right? What I hear from colleagues in the legislature is that my constituents want X, right? I think you look at a lot of polling data and it shows that a lot of people out there are really concerned about the cost of housing, right? So there seems to be a mismatch between what we hear in polling data and what we hear that legislators say they're hearing from their constituents, right? Because whenever a legislator comes to me and says, I'm hearing from my constituents, and I will say, well, how many? Or how did you hear from them? Right. And it ends up being 5 or 6, 7 people. And not that those 5 or 6, 7 people are insignificant or should be ignored. But there are always things where we're going to upset some segment of the population. That doesn't mean we shouldn't take action on something that it appears most people believe is an actual serious public policy issue. Right. So I would respond with that. Right. Talk to your neighbor. I think we need a whole lot of that in general. Right, to try to rebuild bridges between people, because we have lost who we are as people and as communities to social media, in which we actually don't engage with each other. What we do is take in really toxic information from God knows who, right? Some rando on Facebook or Twitter, and suddenly take that as gospel, right? So we need help outside of the building to build greater awareness among the public, who then therefore should contact their legislator and say, you need to act on this. Because right now, the average person out there whose housing cost burden is being used for political purposes inside the building to actually work against them.
And I'll just let you, because we only have a few minutes left, jump all Ron or Eleni or Senator MD, if you want to jump on that same question, what's something advocates can do better to help further your cause? Where can we be helpful to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say, you know, like Jason pointed out, that level of awareness, right? And so perhaps, you know, work with legislators, right? We all have town hall forums in our districts, so come in with us and help us talk to our constituents. You know, do what a lot of you are already doing, right? Stay involved with the process, attend the meetings, testify. If you can't be there, submit written testimony. I can tell you, legislators do read it. All that is important. Be aware of what the committee's goal is and what their agenda is, right? And so make sure that you're in alignment with that. And if you're not, please say so. But, you know, a lot of things that you have been doing has helped lead us to better policy. So keep it up.
And Ron, I would say on submitting testimony and putting things in, I mean, you know, sometimes you see obviously Bill Wells submitted on Bill. You know, you guys want to see that you guys, I imagine, want some level of verifiability that a person's real, right? You don't want to just see people dump anonymous information into the General Assembly feed and JF reports, correct?
Yeah, of course, right. And so to that point, right, I mean, feel free to reach out to us. All of our emails are on the CGA website, and so we want to hear from you. But absolutely, you know, reach out to your legislators, have a conversation with them, and find ways to go forward.
To the point about helping us build coalition, though, I would just say, you know, if you have a really great project in your district, reaching out to me specifically, happy to come out to your district, happy to give it some press. But we need you to do the same thing, so to speak. We need you talking about it in a forum in a good way. We need you in those Facebook groups because, you know, that's to the majority leader's comment about these online things where people are just saying things out of pocket. We need, especially if you were involved somehow in that project, having that credibility is helpful. And I like to call them truth sandwiches. I think continuing to just present the facts in a world where we are sort of post facts, I think it's still important. And so I continue to do that, especially when we talk about the economic benefit of building and having more people in Connecticut, because it is often very hard to get people to care about this from the humanitarian aspect. So I think that, you know, having activists getting other activist groups together. I mean, I'm always looking to build as many coalitions as possible, right? So you're not going to get everything you want. They're not going to get everything they want. But if we have a larger coalitions having the same conversation about why this is important, that is better for us and better for the state and better for progress moving forward.
Bill, I don't want to co-opt your process here, but I just want to respond to Peter Collins's comment in the chat there about why do you think Hartford has the best interest in mind? Well, why do you think it's possible that we can't? Right? I mean, that question is entirely framed as some kind of negative, as if me from East Hartford can't possibly care about Avon when I spent a couple hours last Monday morning in Avon looking at a really great affordable housing project. And I've been to Waterbury and I've been to towns all over Connecticut, right, to think about these things. It's not impossible for me to care about your community or the people that live in it just because I represent East Hartford, right? And I respect the local planning. I was on an inland wetlands commission once in my life too. I respect all those individuals who engage in that work, but sometimes inertia and status quo gets the best of us, right? Or our neighbors yelling at us about any kind of change, about any kind of development that allows a community to grow and prosper and provide housing for teachers and firefighters and, God forbid, low-income families. I don't know that I need to be from a community to care about that when I otherwise just care about it as a matter of principle.
Absolutely. So we're about at time. I want to thank my panelists here. This was a great, lively discussion, and I'm very excited for the upcoming long session. I know you guys are too. I hope everybody gets a good Turkey Day in. I hope everybody gets some rest with their families before we tackle these hard subjects again, before we sit in the long public hearings and we all wade through the Capitol halls and try to figure out how to move Connecticut forward in the right direction. And I'm just going to give it right back to Sean with any final messages before they close down the Zoom for the day.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Representatives and Senator Rahman. That was a really exciting session and a lot of further questions that we'll go look through. And just now, I of course didn't have my notes up. Danielle, I knew it would happen. Can you remind folks what's up next?
Got it. Yeah. So we actually have a quick lunch break now from 12:30 to 1, where we will resume our breakout sessions for the afternoon. So choose your own adventure when you come back from lunch. But thank you all for joining us today. We're so grateful to have all of our legislative bodies with us today, this morning, and looking forward to the conversations after the lunch break.